Hi guys, welcome back to Sacred Vedic Astrology. My name is Samantha and I feel so blessed and so lucky to be a professional Vedic sidereal astrologer. So today we're going to do a really fun analysis into 7th house chart analysis, okay? So I've been working on a series lately where I pinpoint more specific parts of chart analysis as opposed to doing the entire chart. And I think it's really helpful and useful for y'all to learn more about specific analysis in the chart. And I have a lot of fun doing it, and I feel like you guys really like it as well too. So today we're going to focus on 7th house chart analysis, and we're going to do this with the chart of Selena Gomez. So I thought she'd be a really good chart to use because, first of all, we have AA level birth time, which means it's super accurate. We can go into it, we can really do a deep dive because of that high level of accuracy of the birth time, and also because she got married recently, right? It's perfect to do 7th house marriage analysis when we know exactly what the spouse is like, right? Because then we can really bring it all back and understand how all the different planetary aspects have played out. Okay, so we are going to really just focus in on Selena Gomez's 7th house analysis, and I'm going to show you guys how I would look at a client's chart if I was reading their 7th house and they asked me about marriage, their future spouse, etc., what kind of relationship or partnership they're going to attract. And yeah, I think this will be really fun and really informative as well too. Okay. All right, so here we have Selena's Vedic sidereal astrological chart. Okay. So let us start with just looking at the 7th house. Okay, let's look to see what planet sits there, what sign it's in, is it retrograde, what's going on with the 7th house. So Selena has Saturn retrograde in Capricorn in the 7th house. Now, this is really interesting in the sense that Saturn does really well in Capricorn. So Saturn loves to be in Capricorn. So this is a strong Saturn, which means that she's hardworking, she'll do the job, she's really successful with a strong Saturn. She also has a lot of struggles with a strong Saturn as well too, right? You don't ever want to kid yourself when someone has a really strong Saturn. Yes, they're hardworking, yes, they have a lot of perseverance, but they have a lot of struggles and challenges in this lifetime as well too, because Saturn is that very karmic planet. It's about blocks and delays and obstacles and karmic experiences, etc., etc. A strong Saturn will also give some intense life experiences, best believe it. And we've seen that unfold in her life as well too. Okay, so she has a really strong Saturn in the 7th house and it's retrograde. So the first prediction that I would make if I was looking at this chart was, okay, Saturn is strong, it's retrograde, it's in the 7th house. Marriage is only going to come in this chart after the Saturn return. That would be the first major prediction, right? So, okay, let's go through the predictions, go through the analysis, and then connect it to how it played out. Saturn's strong. When Saturn is really strong in a house, it will show that planetary energy develops either during or after the Saturn return, but it's not going to come into its full fruition until the Saturn return when Saturn is strong in a house, right? So, okay, Saturn's strong in the 7th house of marriage. I would predict you're probably going to get married after the Saturn return, early to mid-30s, right? So Selena Gomez reconnected with her now spouse, Benny Blanco, in her early 30s. It was after her Saturn return. So it was about, I think they reconnected in 2023, which would be 2 years ago. So before that point, so 2 years ago, Saturn was in her 8th house. And so basically that would show that her Saturn return was about, let's say, finished about 4 years ago. 4 years ago or so. She met Benny after, or they met prior, but they reconnected after her Saturn return, and the marriage happened after her Saturn return, right? So the energy of Saturn being very strong in the 7th house would show that the marriage comes a little bit later on in life. And I would tell someone, don't even really worry too much about marriage. until post Saturn return, because you're not going to marry the right person. Basically, what happens if someone has a really strong Saturn in the 7th house and they marry before the Saturn return, usually that's a more karmic or misaligned sort of relationship, right? And so let's say, for example, if she had married Justin Bieber, who she was with for so long, and they got married too soon before the Saturn return, that would have been a very messy sort of marriage and divorce, right? First prediction, check, right? She gets married and reconnects with her now spouse after the Saturn return into her early 30s, because Saturn is really strong in her 7th house. Okay, now, because Saturn is retrograde and her 7th house is ruled by Saturn, so it means the 7th ruler's in the 7th house, the next prediction, because it's also retrograde, is she can actually end up with someone that is from her past. Because Saturn is retrograde, the 7th ruler is retrograde. So that can show there's something retrograde about the marriage, about the connection, right? Retrograde means something from the past coming back. And so her 7th ruler is retrograde, and she reconnected with Benny years later, right? They knew each other for a long time. They were just friends. They didn't see anything romantic. And then later on down the line, reconnected after Saturn return. Yes, it was. And they ended up in a relationship. So next thing is 7th ruler is retrograde, which means it can be someone either from the past, someone that feels familiar, someone that there's some sort of reconnection or re-energy with, okay? Next point, check. Check, check, check. I need like a whiteboard behind me to be like writing this stuff down. That was very Gemini rising of me. Okay, so that's the next prediction. Now, let's keep going. Let's keep going, guys. Okay, so Saturn strong in the 7th house gives an older partner. It's not going to happen every single chart. Sometimes there's a percentage that's a little off. One of my second Vedic astrology teachers who is one of the most amazing astrologers I've ever met in my life, even after like gosh knows how many decades of being a professional astrologer, he would always say astrology is about a 75% accurate science, in the sense that it's not going to happen every single time. But a good deal of the time, when someone has Saturn in the 7th house, especially if Saturn is strong, they end up with someone who's older than them. Okay? And next check, right? Benny is, I believe, 5 or 6 years older than Selena Gomez, right? So there you go. Saturn's in the 7th. It gives an older partner as well, too. Okay, check, right? Now, 7th ruler is in the 7th house. So the 7th house rules business partnerships, business connection. And so it can show that someone meets their partner through business, through collaboration, through a business deal, through a business connection. They initially met because they worked on music together. They've done songs together. Now they work together. They collaborate. 7th ruler is in the 7th house of business partnership and connection. So it shows that someone can do business, work with their partner, have a business with their marriage partner, and they also came out with an album together where it was like completely collaborative. So that's the 7th ruler in the 7th house of business, partnership, business connection. Check, 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 check. Okay. So, okay, that's where we would start with 7th house analysis, right? Just taking all of that, looking at the 7th house, that is what we can see from just Saturn strong retrograde in the 7th house, analyzing the 7th house and the 7th ruler. Okay. Now, let us look opposite the 7th house. So this is really important, guys. This is probably one of the most important things in Vedic astrology analysis that is different from Western astrology. Is in Vedic astrology, oppositions are similar to conjunctions in the way that they still create that really powerful energy. Let's say Venus is conjunct Saturn or Venus is opposite Saturn. It's similar in the way that it unfolds in the chart. It's still this like 100% power aspect, okay? And if someone has a lot of planets in one house, we always want to look to the opposite house to understand like, okay, they have a lot of energy in their first house. Guess what? Now they have a lot of energy in their 7th house, right? Because it's direct opposition. So Sun, Venus, Mercury is in the 1st, which means it's all aspecting the 7th. So again, Selena has a very Saturnian sort of chart because she has a really strong Saturn in the 7th, aspecting her 1st, and it's also opposite all these planets, right? So that's creating this opposition energy where she has a very Saturnian sort of life, right? She has difficulties, she has a lot of karmic experiences, she learns a lot of lessons, she has to grow up very quickly, she was very responsible from a young age, she probably had issues with her father, there was some karmic distance from the father, etc., etc. Okay, so all these planets now aspect by opposition the 7th house. Yes, they do. So, okay. Saturn's in the 7th. We already analyzed that. Now let's take these aspects and unravel that as well too. So Mercury is on the 7th. Okay, so she's attracted to partners who are business-minded, intellectual, they have good conversations. There's now this more mental energy onto the 7th. Again, she does business with Benny Blanco. They've gone into a lot of like business together. They wrote a whole album together. Mercury's on the 7th. Mercury is writing, expression, communication. Okay, onto the 7th house. Now Venus is on the 7th. This is like a very literal one because Venus is the arts, right? Venus is creativity. Venus is beauty, luxury. So when Venus aspects or influences the 7th, they're very drawn to like artistic, creative partners, right? And if we think about, who she was with before Benny, it was Justin Bieber for so long, and he was also a musician. He was also an artist. So Venus is now influencing that 7th, giving an interest in creative, artistic partners who are in the arts to some degree. Okay, check. check. Then we also get the Sun influencing the 7th. Sun on the 7th can give partners who are bossy, domineering, so she can be with people that have a more confident sort of energy about them. Like, she's going to be drawn to someone who has some level of leadership or confidence as well, too. And I would say from what I've seen of Benny Blanco, he seems pretty confident, he's very talkative, he's pretty loud, successful, themes like that. Okay, so Sun, Venus, Mercury, onto the 7th house, creative partner, artistic partner, musical partner, writing, business. They wrote a whole album together, an artistic album. Like, how much more literal can we get? Check. Okay, I don't even know how many checks that is at this point, but that is the planets that go on to the 7th house by aspect. Okay, because that's really important as well too. You never want to miss the aspects onto the 7th house, or any house if you're analyzing it in Vedic astrology. Okay, now the next place we're going to look to for spouse analysis is, of course, and I just did a whole video on this, but the Dara Karaka, which is the lowest degree planet in the chart. Right, so this is a branch of astrology. It's not Parashara astrology, but it's Gemini astrology, in which you take all of the degree points and divide it up into different portions. So you go, if you guys can see here, it says like 7 karakas, right? So this is highest, second highest, third highest, fourth, fifth, sixth, 7th, which is actually why it's connected to the spouse, right? Because this is the first house, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, 7th. That might have completely confused you guys. That might have been way too complex. But do you see how like all of the karakas start with the first karaka? So that's the Atma karaka, which is like the first house essentially. So it's like the self, right? And then they say that the AMK, or the second highest degree, can be the career because it's the second. So it can be like money, work, career, like that. And then the final karaka is the Dara karaka, which is the lowest degree, which is down here, lowest degree. And that is because it's like the 7th house, or the spouse house, right? But if that made no sense, just ignore that. Just ignore that aspect. You guys don't need to know that. Okay, so Dharkarka is the moon, right? Because the moon is essentially like 1 degree, 22 seconds. And that's a very low degree part of the chart, right? So her highest degree is Mercury, and then her lowest degree is the moon. Okay, so if we reflect on what I talked about in the Dharkarka video, which if you guys have not watched it, go check that out. I talk about Dharkarka planets. It's the moon, right? So it gives a creative partner, gives a sort of feminine, sensitive partner, gives a partner who can be addicty or up and down and moody, right? And Justin Bieber was very addicty, very moody, very creative, very sensitive. Benny Blanco, I'm not so sure about the moodiness or the addiction side. I have no clue, but he is very sensitive. He's an artist, he's a creative, and he seems to be very in touch with his feminine side from what I have seen. Okay, Moon Dharkarka. It's pretty much everything I talked about in the Dharkarka video, right? Now, this is where it gets even more interesting and pinpointed spot on, is the Dharkarka, or the spouse indicator, is also in the 10th house of career, right? So if we look at both Justin and Benny Blanco, and the reason I'm bringing up like Justin Bieber into this as well too is because it's like all relationships, right? So we're seeing the themes, we're seeing the patterns and how it has unraveled, right? It hasn't just been one person that embodies these qualities. It's been multiple, right? She's been with a lot of artists, creative, sensitive, like that. Okay. So Dharkarka moon, sensitive, creative, artistic partner. She has to watch out for like moodiness, up and down, partners with addiction issues, like that. But it's also in the 10th house of career, so she is drawn to a spouse or a partner who is connected to her career or is very career focused, right? So she ends up with someone who is connected to her career, they've worked together, and is very career focused. Check. There it is. And this is very, very fascinating. So she actually reconnected with Benny Blanco when Jupiter was over her Dharkarka, over her spouse indicator, right? Because they reconnected in 2023. Jupiter is now here. So if we go back 1 year, 2 years, when Jupiter was over her spouse indicator, that's when she reconnected with her current spouse. And dasha-wise, 2024, she entered a moon dasha, which is her Dharkarka or her spouse indicator, right? So that would show us that when she enters the moon dasha, it comes online for her to meet the spouse, right? Because that's the dasha sequence of the spouse, right? And then Jupiter was also over her Dharkarka, over her spouse indicator when they reconnected. All right, and I mean, how much more spot on can we get? She got married in her Dharkarka dasha when Jupiter was over her Dharkarka. Or they reconnected when Jupiter was over her Dharkarka, but she got married in the moon dasha. All right, and let's see if there's anything in the D9, 7th house, 7th rulers in the 2nd. Okay, so 7th ruler, we have Rahu in the 7th and the D9. So that would show that she's attracted to people who are very Rahu-like. They can have intense personalities. They can be bold, but there can also be elements of trickery, deceit. There can be something a little bit different culturally about her partners. They're from a different upbringing. They have different cultural differences, themes like that. And then the 7th ruler is in the 2nd house, which means that her partners are connected to her money and her finances at times, and then it's ruled by Venus because her 7th house is Taurus, and it's ruled by Venus in the 2nd, so that would also show that she's attracted to, again, artistic and creative partners. Okay. And we could have pretty easily predicted like the timing of marriage for her because she came out of her Saturn return, right? So remember, the marriage is not going to happen until after the Saturn return. They reconnected when Jupiter was over her spouse indicator, and then they got married when she went into her moon spouse indicator dasha. And when the D9 7th ruling planet was in the Bhukti cycle, that's when she also reconnected with Benny as well too. Okay. All right, guys, so that was really fun. Like some charts, here's the thing about it, guys, and I feel like I don't see like a lot of astrologers talk about this all the time, but a truth of astrology, like a very real truth, is some people's charts are very, very, very easy to read. Okay, and this usually depends on like their ninth house, their Jupiter, if they have like a decent ninth house or a ninth house ruler, if they don't have tons of afflictions on their ninth house. But some charts just are so easy to read. And Selena Gomez has one of those charts where like, oh my God, it's just so easy to read. Like I could read this chart for days and pick up more information, and there's so much accuracy, and she's doing the exact things, and it's just so on point. And then there's other charts that are more difficult and you have to like really pull things out. It's almost like pulling teeth. But Selena's one of those charts where like, I could sit here and just like keep reading her chart and keep going because there's so much to pull from it. So that's why I think it's a really great chart to use for 7th house analysis. All right. So let me know your guys' thoughts down below. Also, let me know if this made sense or if I kind of lost you when I got into the more complex aspects of talking about the karakas and the 7th house and all that sort of stuff. But I always love to hear your feedback and your thoughts as well too. And I mean, she's pretty much with the exact description of her spouse indicator. And it doesn't mean that, you know, they're going to be together forever. I'm not saying that, because she's actually in Sadhisati right now, so Saturn is now in the phase before her moon. But here's the thing about it, she's going to go through a lot of tests these next 7.5 years. So it's not going to be an easy, synergetic time for like marriage, actually, because she's in Sadhisati. I think it's going to be a time where she got the relationship and now there's a lot of tests. There's a lot that's going to come up. That would be my prediction because she's in Sadhisati, but she has been with 2 major prominent relationships that fit her 7th house description to a T. Okay. All right, so I hope you guys enjoyed. Comment down below what your thoughts were, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more content coming soon. And I always love to hear from you guys, any suggestions for further videos. And if you guys want me to do this with your own Vedic astrological chart, you can always book your own personal reading down below. It'll be linked in the description. All right, so sending all the love, and we'll talk soon. Bye, guys.